with Mark McKay. He's the managing director, CEO, and principal broker for Brown and Brown Canada. Mark, how are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Pretty good. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. So, can you explain sort of what kind of happened in this situation and how it happened?
What I could do is, I think, sort of share with you some of the characteristics of a typical cyber breach. I don't know the very specifics of the facts, but this breach would be covered under a couple of pieces of provincial legislation. One would be the MFIPA, which is specific to education, and the other is the Educators Act. So typically what happens in a scenario like this is that there would be some type of vulnerability within the system. Usually it's as a result of the lacking of a patch, or somebody has failed to remedy. And then what happens is a threat actor, or the bad guys, if you will, scour the internet to see where those vulnerabilities exist. What would have happened, there would have been some type of phishing event or some type of other vulnerability that would have been taken advantage of. And the threat actor, which is, again, the bad guy, would have gotten into the system and then extracted a number of records, what are called PII, or personal identifiable information. And those records, specifically within, schools, could range from photographs of children. It could be report cards. It could be disciplinary actions. It could be medical information. So that would have been extracted and then taken and put into the dark web and probably sold. Or another routing could have been that there could have been a ransom asked for. And so a lot of this information is held very, very secret, because it's usually coordinated by what's called a breach coach, and that breach coach would be typically a law firm. And they would investigate exactly what happened. They probably had some form of cyber insurance
right.
That was triggered. And that breach coach, which is, again, typically a law firm, would then investigate and probably are compelled to notify the Privacy Commissioner in Ontario. And in some cases, if it's beyond provincial, it has to go to the Ontario or the Ottawa-based Privacy Commissioner, which is federal. And then they would now be in a situation where they have to give notice to all those affected PIIs. So they'd have to understand exactly how many records were extracted, who was affected, and they would have to give notice to all of those records. And in sort of parallel with that, there might be some ransom that would be asked for by the threat actor, and that negotiation would take place between a firm that would be appointed by the insurer or the law firm to negotiate with the threat actor, and there could be some type of ransom that's paid, usually in the form of Bitcoin.
Oh my God.
And then those records hopefully are released with a document of destruction, certified that they're giving back everything they stole. And then all the affected systems would have to have some type of analysis done, a vulnerability analysis, and also a forensic audit to make sure that whatever was penetrated, or where the lack of attention was, that gets patched. And then all those affected records, if there was some type of potential damage, they'd have to have ongoing credit monitoring to make sure that if there's anything that happens within sort of the next 12 months, in some cases 24, that they're remedied in terms of any reimbursement for costs. And then there could be, at the back end of this, a class action. In that class action, because there's commonality of fact, you get formed and become significant damages to potentially PowerSchool and also the school board.
Wow. That is just, that's really, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's pretty serious stuff, and it's taken very seriously by regulators.
Wow.
A lot of this is insured. However, not all is insured.
So do we know if they are negotiating with a threat actor, as you call them, in terms of a ransom in this particular case?
It could be. You'd have to speak directly to the school board representatives or their legal counsel.
Right.
I doubt that they would disclose that.
Right.
Very tightly. But it's usually negotiated by somebody that would also negotiate kidnaps and ransoms. It's a very bizarre sort of environment in that you're sort of rewarding threat actors to do this because there's insurance behind it, but at the same time, it's a way to mitigate further damage from the threat actors.
Wow. So these school boards actually have insurance against this then as well too, right?
Yeah, you would think, and that would be something you might want to investigate. I'm sort of theorizing that they do,
Right.
and most do in sort of today's world. But it's really the extent and the breadth and the amount of limits that they have available to fund this activity. And I've been involved intimately in three of these situations, and they're quite bizarre. They're very, very technical, and usually it's as a result of what I would call lack of hygiene, and that's just not having enough enforcement of making sure that all your vulnerabilities are known and they're patched. Giving good guidance in terms of how you access the system, multi-factor authentication, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow. So there are like paid hackers out there that probably, some are paid hackers that are trying to breach all of these security things, but then there's probably paid hackers that a lot of legitimate organizations are hiring to say, we need to test the system to see, can this system be hacked, because they're trying to mitigate against something like this even happening to them, right?
Correct. Yeah. So in order for you to procure the insurance and at a scale of this, either through PowerSchool or through the various municipalities or the school boards, the insurers require that type of due diligence. So they actually scour the net to look for vulnerabilities. They try and penetrate your system, and they identify vulnerabilities. It's not foolproof, but it's a pretty good way to at least start the journey. And then, as you can imagine, large like financial institutions, they have full-time people. This is all they do, is they make sure that the information is safe, because it's very, very valuable. I mean, with information comes knowledge, and with knowledge comes power, right? So that's kind of...
Absolutely. I mean, if you're hacking into people's parents' information, for example, and you've got their financial records, that's one thing. But the idea that you're hacking into a school system and now you've got pictures of kids, that's so disturbing to me. And I'm sure it's so disturbing to all the parents out there that, I mean, we know that there are horrible humans out there. And this is not the kind of information that we want those people to have access to.
Well, 100%. Yeah, that's right on. It's a concern, and I would encourage all the parents to be vocal and to ask the questions, that become educated. Become educated on MFIPA, which is the Privacy Act in Ontario. Become educated on PETA. There's new legislation coming through federally in terms of the Consumer Privacy Protection Act. I mean, become educated on it, and challenge your local counselors in terms of, and also provincial MPPs in terms of what they're doing about it, and how knowledgeable are they.
Wow. And so if, let's say a school board, let's say the size of the TDSP were to have the TDSB to have this kind of insurance, how much does this kind of insurance even cost?
Well, it's a very good question. It really depends. It's a function of, how strong of a negotiator are they? It's a function of how many what are called PII, which are records. It's a function of how much limit they buy, which is the amount of insurance that's available. It's a function of what types of coverage within cyber they buy. So it's sort of like how much is car insurance, right? It's right. Really, how many tickets have you had? What time you drive, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow. And then in about 30 seconds, can you tell us about how can people protect themselves from something like this?
Yeah, good hygiene. If you haven't expected something in your inbox, don't open it. If you haven't expected something in your text, don't open it. If it's something from a vendor you've never bought from, don't open it. And if you have a question, if it looks like it's something interesting, then call up that vendor and see exactly what it is. And I've been duped myself. I was expecting something coming in from overseas, and it looked like to be Canada Customs. It said click here because there's an additional tariff that you have to pay. I clicked it, and I was scammed. But right away they dipped into an account, and fortunately I was quick enough that my bank called me to let me know. So good on the bank. But it's just all about good hygiene. Surf around the internet, become familiar in terms of what scams are out there. But it's really just if you don't expect it, don't open it.
Wow, geez, Mark McKay, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been very insightful.
I just put a shout out to my kids, Pippi, Sigurd, and Jojo today.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, okay. Mark.
You betcha.
That was Mark McKay, Managing Director and CEO and Principal Broker from Brown & Brown Canada. We were just chatting about the TDSB and the school breach this week, which I think has been horrifying to a lot of the parents out there.